Good evening, good afternoon, or whenever you happen to be listening to this. Welcome to the Film Realist Podcast, the film and TV podcast from a complete nobody that's hopefully for somebody. If you are listening to this, I hope you are doing well. If you are watching live on Twitch, that's Film Realists, twitch.tv/filmrealist. You can see my awesome Daredevil shirt, which I am rocking because we are going to be covering She-Hulk Season 1. But before we get to that, I have a special announcement. If you are not following on Twitter or Instagram, you may have missed this, which is that next week's episode on Monday, our regular scheduled episode, will be a chat with the author Sean O'Connell from Cinema Blend, who is going to be discussing his second book, With Great Power: How Spider-Man Conquered Hollywood During the Golden Age of Comic Book Blockbusters. I'm very much looking forward to talking to Sean about his book. I even have his first one, Release the Snyder Cut, the crazy true story behind the fight that saved Zack Snyder's Justice League. I have read the book, thoroughly enjoyed it. If you want a really interesting look at the history behind Zack Snyder's overall involvement with Warner Brothers and the DC Universe, and ultimately what led to the film being released. I have not read any of With Great Power yet, but I will be receiving a review copy. So as soon as I have completed that, I will be posting a review as part of a future episode. The book doesn't officially come out until November 1st. It's available on all international Amazons if you would like to order the book. So yes, that is the special announcement. I am looking very much forward to talking to Sean about all things Marvel, but specifically Spider-Man, the webhead himself. So as I mentioned, I will be talking about She-Hulk. There will be a non-spoiler overview, and there will be a spoiler review section. The time codes will be listed in the description. I will then hop to it because I am looking forward to talking about this show that only finished, day of recording, yesterday. She-Hulk, which is a 9-episode series. Does it count as a mini-series anymore? I actually don't know if we're allowed. Is it a mini-series, shorts? I'm not exactly sure what this is, but this is one of the last parts of Phase 4. As date of recording, the last major part of Phase 4 we are getting is Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Series was created by Jessica Gao, starring Tatiana Maslany, music by Amy Doherty, produced Kevin Feige, the usual suspects. So I did do 2 episodes of She-Hulk recap episodes, and I think it's safe to say that my opinion from those has pretty much carried forward into the remainder of the season. I believe that Tatiana Maslany was absolutely spectacular as this character. I'm very glad that there were things happening around Jennifer Walters, but like the show is titled, it is her show fundamentally. I think that it works very, very well, giving the origin story in the first episode and then letting a series of events build to a larger event without getting into specific details. My Siri almost went off. That would not have been good. I think it was an interesting idea. Now, if you have been completely avoiding any marketing for this, then this is, I guess, technically spoilers, but having Daredevil in the very beginning of the marketing, I think set some fans off, expecting him to be a major part of the show. But ultimately, I think the part of the show that he is in really does work with where Jen is from that specific character point of view, and where the story has put her emotionally, and her relationships with everybody else that are affected at around that time. I would love to see more of this. I think it does a very interesting job of expanding the Marvel Universe, but really playing against its conventions, but like most Marvel things, ultimately still kind of fitting within them, which was really entertaining to watch. I think it was quite comical. They did market this show as a legal comedy. I would say ultimately, I think it's very light on the legal aspect of this, having watched a few legal shows, going back to obviously Daredevil being one of them, but something like Suits. I know that this is mimicking more Ally McBeal than then something like that. Now, I've never actually watched an episode of Ally McBeal, so if you have watched one or several seasons, episodes of that show, let me know if it does fit more in line with that. So you can tweet at me, Kyle_Naranya, or directly to the podcast at film_realists for tone. I think that the humor was played very well with this show. I didn't find a lot of the jokes to fall flat, which is great, because if a comedy does have a significant amount of jokes that do fall flat, it starts to feel as if it has nothing else to say. And one of the parts of the show that I found most interesting was how it decided to talk about fan culture, which was specifically looking at somebody who may or may not have issues with representation in the realm of comic books, specifically with superheroes in this universe. Now, does it come out swinging? Probably not. I think it does err on the safer side of that conversation. Similar to how now, I should preface this again. I am not an African Canadian. I am not an African American. So I'm perspective wise, there have been shows and films that have come across, I think, more bluntly with how they Get Out being a great example of something where they're not going to hide the subtext, but ultimately Disney is a business and wants to have mass appeal for their products and films and franchises. So they are going to say something, but they're not going to say everything maybe that the creatives behind the show would want to say. And the reason I bring that up is Captain America, or not Captain America, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I think had a lot of great things to say, but ultimately in Falcon's speech, or not Falcon, in Captain America's speech, Anthony Mackie's Captain America, at the end of the show, I don't know exactly if he provides a solution. He just tells people to do better. And I think it would be more impactful if that character who is telling people to be better had active solutions for those problems. I think the message would have hit home significantly better. Now, while this show does talk about internet trolls specifically, I think ultimately this show doesn't give, while an insane final episode, the conclusion to those storylines does not wrap up well. I think they came up with a really great idea of almost imploding the fourth wall, and while I thoroughly enjoyed that piece of the show, I don't think the resolution it comes to is ultimately very satisfying, and I think there are a lot of threads left untied that may or may not come forward in a season 2. There have been rumors that she is going to be showing up in Captain America: A New World Order, and I wasn't going to do this as a whole piece of news, but while I am talking about that movie specifically, it seems to have been confirmed that Harrison Ford will be taking over the role of General Thunderbolt Ross, which is certainly interesting given how Harrison Ford has really come back to a lot of franchises. Rarely has he done just paychecks. I know there was a lot of criticism over his performance, spoilers, in Rise of Skywalker. It's a 3-year-old movie, I'm sorry. Maybe not? No, I'm not sorry. But ultimately, when he has returned to franchises or been a big part of a blockbuster, rarely do I think Harrison is phoning it in. I guess maybe you could be critical of his performance in Ender's Game, but that movie has a lot of other problems besides Harrison's performance. The wire work alone being one of them when they're floating around in space. But that I'm looking forward to. I hope that the rumors are true. I think Jennifer's connections to different parts of the universe, specifically how she connects to other characters' stories happening around them or around the MCU, would be really interesting to see this character to move forward in film and then hopefully get the effects budget that a character of this scale and significance moving forward deserves, quite frankly, because it's unfortunate that the titular character of this show does have such inconsistent visual effects, where there are shots where she looks absolutely fantastic, completely photoreal. Obviously, I understand that a green character is going to be pushing up against the uncanny valley, where you know something is off, but you're not necessarily sure what is off, and that makes it specifically frustrating when She-Hulk is put up next to Smart Hulk. Now, I understand the fact that we've had Smart Hulk for quite a while, and there's been an opportunity to become comfortable and used to that character design and that character model specifically. I guess 2 films really, but even still, it's been 3 years since we did see him in Avengers Endgame. I hope that the CGI She-Hulk model, or not model, somebody may be thinking, I should phrase this more precisely, that the CGI virtual model, not a person walking down a runway, but the design of that character hopefully is rendered out better given more time. There is a joke about visual effects and where they are moving forward later in the show that I think is quite funny, how they are able to avoid actual heavy VFX shots given the fact that this is still a television series. At the end of the day, I would recommend this. I think it's very funny. I think it's refreshing from a lot of the other Marvel TV stuff. I would put this in the top tier of the shows that Disney Plus has made for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. My personal favorites right now happen to be Miss Marvel, not in order, Miss Marvel, She-Hulk, and WandaVision. I think they were the most concise with what they were trying to do. They were consistent for the most part, ultimately with their tone, and the story I think was significantly better structured than something like Loki or Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Don't even get me started on What If. I thought that was just an awful animated series, but that's just my opinion. And I know we are going to be getting a Marvel Zombies version of that show, which is only about 4 episodes, which is certainly interesting to know, because if at best those episodes may be half an hour long, so we get essentially a 2.5 hour or 2 hour movie, which I don't really understand, but that may or may not be true. It seemed that that was trending on the internet today, amongst a lot of other things. But it will be mature rated, which is great, but I don't think 4 episodes is long enough to tell a captivating story. I know the longest season of Clone Wars was 12 and 13, sometimes 10, even 10. But for a short form series, I don't think 4 is long enough to tell a captivating story. So that's how I feel about She-Hulk. If you do want to stick around in spoilers, I appreciate you. If you do not and want to go and watch the show and then come back, I also appreciate that, as long as you are continuing to listen to my solo podcast. We are going to be jumping into spoilers, so if you do not want to hear them, I would pause the episode and come back later. Spoilers for She-Hulk. All right, let's get started at the end and work our way back. I think that's probably the most successful way for me to be able to recap everything in my brain as to what happened in the show. So, what was the biggest fourth wall implosion? Well, it happened to be that Jane Walters was in the middle of the cabin where Emil Blonsky, aka the Abomination, had his own retreats, and it turned out that the intelligentsia was being run by Todd, who is hulking John Bass, and that they were trolling amongst trolling and said typical things you see on the internet from, quite frankly, incels about criticism over a female version of a character. And we do see that Emil has been turning back and forth into the Abomination quite frequently, which Jen is thoroughly disappointed by, because she is, as a result of her actions in the final episode, has to wear a power dampener, so she can no longer become She-Hulk. It is taken from her, and what I loved most about this final episode was that we do get to see what was the first trailer for this show, which I found very funny, which was a 70s to 80s style intro, similar to the original Incredible Hulk series with Lou Ferrigno, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. I thought it was very funny, and the effects were very bad. And I believe, I would have to look this up to completely correct it, or to corroborate this, but the actress playing actual She-Hulk was the stand-in for Tatiana when they were shooting some of the She-Hulk scenes. So that was quite funny. I enjoyed that quite a bit. But yes, so the reason I think that this is an interesting ending, but I don't think it's thoroughly satisfying, is that a lot of the plot threads that the show was making a focus, specifically with Josh, who stole her blood, hacked her phone, we do see the hacked phone part come back, but the blood part does seem to be, Todd uses it to become Bro Hulk is what I'm gonna, or Chad Hulk. Chad Hulk makes more sense. Chad Hulk, and Jen hates it, and she actually goes through the fourth wall of Disney Plus to the writer's room. You see some of the writers for these episodes. I'm assuming Jessica Gao being there, Francesca Gales, Melissa Hunter, Dana Schwartz. I believe they're all present. Zeb Wells, Kara Brown, and Cody Ziegler are all there saying that Kevin, this is all Kevin's idea. And so she says, well, I'm going to go talk to Kevin, goes through a gauntlet of security, and ultimately sees that Kevin is an artificial intelligence machine designed to churn out storylines and decisions. And I think that is very, very funny. I thought as a joke, it's very comical to have an algorithm or AI be in charge of the cookie cutter factory line MCU, which some have criticized, and some I would say sometimes that criticism is accurate and sometimes less so. But I think that was a very, very funny joke. However, the fact that the show did have all these storylines that did seem half-baked to some degree and is able to just tie them up in a bow is very funny, but it's not great writing at the end of the day. I wish we had an actual resolution with Jessica's character because of all the things she does go through. The closure for her personally is getting to see Todd arrested, and she is going to sue him because Jessica is Jessica, and she does not want to solve this problem Hulk style. She wants to solve this problem through the legal system, which does fit with who she is at the beginning and who she is at the end. She does not want to be defined by She-Hulk, but we do see her lose her power. She clearly has some ideas of what she wants Kevin to bring back. Getting to see my boy Charlie Cox again as Daredevil was very funny with a Fast and Furious style dinner, which may or may not have influenced the art that will be posted with episode 11 when it goes live on your favorite podcast platforms. You can check that out on the Instagram and the Twitter for the podcast. I worked on that prior to recording, which is one of the first times I think I have done that. So I liked this part of it, but it doesn't, I think it prevents the show from being an interesting rewatch because the ending is not really satisfying. It is certainly funny and entertaining, but it falls in line with some of the problems I have with Phase 4, where they seem to be half-baked and half thought through. Some of the best Marvel films, I can't say TV shows because, quite frankly, even though I enjoy a fair amount of the Marvel TV on Disney+, they have not been able to reach the heights and not gravitas, but quality of something like Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, or Daredevil yet. I hope it comes that day. I hope these shows, I don't know how to phrase that, so I'm just going to abandon ship. But yeah, speaking of Daredevil, I thoroughly enjoyed seeing Charlie Cox brought back into the show. This is really the first time we get to see him outside of his appearances in a couple other things last year. I have no issue with PG-13 written Matt Murdock. I think it feels exactly like the same character. And one thing that I thought of that I haven't seen anywhere else yet. Now, I came up with this idea while watching his episode that he showed up in last week, which was episode 8. Date of recording for this, it was last week. Is that I believe the reason his suit would have to be changed colors in incorporating the yellow/gold instead of the all red design would likely be due to the fact that post the events of season 3, and if you didn't watch Daredevil season 3, Ben Kendrick, looking at you, bud, that with what happens with Bullseye wearing the Daredevil suit and causing all kinds of havoc, the public would not necessarily be aware that that was not Daredevil. Obviously, we do see in that finale of season 3 that the cops are aware of who the real Daredevil is, wearing the more classic Frank Miller white suit with the Muay Thai white gloves on as he beats up Kingpin to a pulp. But the character, to some degree, in the public eye, would need a rebranding. The way that superheroes typically do that, there's a change of costume. So that would be, at least in my point of view, the perfect way to justify the Daredevil color / rebrand. It works to 2 degrees. Obviously, story-wise, as well as there is a different looking version now in the Marvel Cinematic Universe with this gold and red version. And then, of course, if you are a longtime Daredevil fan, the original suit was also yellow and red. So I thought that was really, really cool and an interesting thing that may or may not be a thread. Maybe it was a complete coincidence and they just happened to do it because of the comics, but I think it totally fits with the history of Charlie Cox's Matt Murdock / Daredevil, which was fun. His chemistry with Tatiana Maslany was absolutely palpable on screen. They totally fit in with the comic book counterparts of their comic book characters. I know Dan Slott has said how much he loves it, which is great when somebody who has had a long history with the character attests that this is accurate to the portrayal of this character. I mentioned earlier that I don't think this show had a ton. Well, I appreciate that it looks at internet culture and makes comments on it. Ultimately, I think what's most unfortunate about this being a Disney product is there have been several examples throughout the run of Disney-owned properties where there have been harassment, threats towards minorities, women. Rose in Last Jedi comes to mind, where the companies almost do very, very little to prevent or say anything about these things. So the show doing it in this way is, I think, interesting and something. Obviously, mentioning it all is a step in the right direction, but it kind of falls flat at the end because there is only a consequences for one of those characters. We find out that Josh was just a hired actor. So how much is Todd paying an actor to steal somebody's phone information and steal a sample of their blood? So that's the problem with a show like that is not as tightly wrapped, when every single plot point isn't worked out to the degree of something like the Winter Soldier, or heck, even the Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, where each step connects to the other, where if you look at each of these specific episodes with a microscope, they kind of start to fall apart. I had that issue with something like Spider-Man No Way Home. Eternals obviously has some issues, but I'm most looking forward to seeing where this show goes with She-Hulk moving forward. Tatiana is not an actress that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is going to sign for one season. Like I said, it's rumored she's going to be popping up in Captain America New World Order, which would make sense given the fact that we know the leader is going to be in it, who is a character obviously from or teased in The Incredible Hulk, the last Marvel movie to really get any references outside of Iron Man 2's Justin Hammer. And then the biggest reveal at the very end of this is that Savage Hulk, which would be the way that I've described him in Sakaar, now has a son, Scar. He's got a son, Hulk. Who's the mom? We don't know. It's a nice loose thread moving forward. Maybe we'll actually get a movie, but who knows? I'm very, very happy that this show does exist. I think it was certainly a refreshing show based on some of the more like movies, but just cut up, edited poorly into individual episodes that we occasionally get from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think it's a great follow-up from something like Miss Marvel, which really felt like its own unique thing. Well, then at the end, however, it did fall into fighting somebody with pretty much the same powers. So I think She-Hulk, if you're still listening to this and haven't watched it, I think now that all 9 episodes are out, you can totally binge all the way through them. I do not think you need to be somebody who is living and breathing the Marvel Cinematic Universe for this to work. I think there is enough play on the conventions of the MCU while also being a fresh take on things we have seen before. And that especially happens because we ultimately don't really get an ending. We get a family-style Fast and Furious barbecue, which was fun, which I enjoyed. So yeah, that's all I have to say about She-Hulk. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please review 5 stars, 0 stars, anything to help to promote the show, I thoroughly appreciate. Follow on all the social media platforms. If you somehow missed the announcement at the beginning of the episode, I'm going to say it one more time because I'm very excited about it. Sean O'Connell of Cinema Blend will be joining me to discuss his new book about the Sony history with Spider-Man, which I am very much looking forward to. That will be on the regular schedule, which will be Mondays, which is the live stream of the episodes, and then that episode will be on your podcast platforms as soon as I edit that episode, which is usually Monday nights, at least Eastern Standard Time. Thank you very much. So yes, next week will be that interview, and then you will find out what is coming the week after. Actually, I can tell you because I've tweeted it. So many things have come out that were going to be secrets, and now they are not, which is next week. So that is October 17th will be my interview with Sean O'Connell. And then the following week, which is October 24th, barring any change in schedule, I've had confirmation at least twice right now, so I'm very excited that I will be having a conversation about Black Adam with Stephen Colbert of ScreenRant.com and of SnyderMinute.com. Stephen is a big fan of the Snyder films, and it will certainly be interesting to discuss the hierarchy of power in the DC Extended Universe. I'll see you next time.